Deathloop's powers are absolutely gnarly. From hurling dudes around in midair in a way that makes Darth Vader look like a bitch, to killing an entire crowd with a single bullet, to going invincible and invisible at the same dang time, and utmost of all, the almighty bootfuck. The powers in this game are absolutely radical, and some of Arcane's best work yet. But what's even better is how you can use these powers in unique ways, and the way they interact with the game, and all the options you have at hand. Today, we'll go over 11 things I've found in the game so far that you maybe haven't thought of, combining powers, weapons, and explaining the intricacies from movement tech to outright having explosions at your fingertips. Let's get right into it. So, slide shifting. This in itself is actually a really useful little piece of movement tech that's carried over from the Dishonored series. While you slide, you can shift, and it will continue slightly after you teleport. But when you combine this with slide tackle executions, it gets really spicy. You can use this for lightning fast assassinations on most unaware enemies. Just do a short sprint, slide, shift, and assassinate. It's really quick and efficient, but a little tricky to land. Definitely one you want to practice a little with first before you start taking out Eternalists from around the corner. The nice thing is, sliding is technically stealthy movement, noise-wise at least. So you can use this to your advantage when you want to take out a lookout really quickly, or you just want to flex unnecessarily, because that's fine too. Now, shift swapping. This is one that's actually really simple. In order to shift swap, you just need to look at an enemy in range and aim at them, and you'll swap positions. But when you start combining this with explosives and death drops, it could be really fun to pull off. Just place your own mine at your feet, swap with an enemy, and bam, there you go. Easy 1, 2, 3 trap. Same with dropping an enemy from a high height. But for this, you probably want the airborne upgrade on shift, so you can have a few seconds to aim if you need to. Grenades, mines, and tripwires do a ton of damage, but you can't replenish them while you're out in the map, so ensuring they land with tricky stuff like shift swapping is a great use for them. And if you're really tight with your timing, you can catch out an enemy as they're throwing a grenade or after they've thrown a grenade, swap positions with them, and they'll either have thrown the grenade to the position you're at or have the grenade in their hand, and they'll technically wind up blowing themselves up. Shift swapping is one of those things that you can really experiment with, and I've found personally anything that makes an explosion or makes a bit of a kaboom is great to swap with an enemy. Next up, shift kicking. Now, this is way more satisfying if you have dropkick equipped. Basically, you can Fus Roda dudes right out of the time loop. But even without dropkick, shift kicking is incredibly useful. This ties back to my beginner tips, but when you kick an enemy, you line up an easy one-shot kill. So, when you combine this with shift kicking, you get an easy medium range one-shot kill. Now, there is a small caveat to this. You want to make sure that you're shifting in front of the enemy as opposed to like directly on the enemy, and as well, you want to make sure that the enemy isn't going to be moving into where you're shifting to because things can get a little bit weird. As well, the timing can be a little bit tricky, so you want to make sure that you're shifting first and kicking second in succession. Okay, so enough about shift. Let's talk about my favorite power in the game, Karnesis. Now this trick is simple, but so damn efficient. All you need is Karnesis with suspension and grenades, and once you lift an enemy up into the air with suspension, you just plop a grenade right on them, and they turn into basically a Karnesis death bomb. I find this method to be really efficient for taking down Wenjis and Visionaries really quickly, and if the grenade stuck to the face doesn't do the trick, then you can always just pick them up with Karnesis again and slam them around a couple times. This is another one of those things that you can really experiment with when you're playing. Maybe pick up a battery along the way, Karnesis an enemy up in the air for an easy battery shot. And really, it's this kind of malleability of Karnesis that I think makes it one of the better powers in the game. When you use Karnesis, you have 5 possible directions to throw an enemy: left, right, forwards, backwards, or upwards. In your settings, you can choose between your normal click being upwards or forwards, but I kind of prefer upwards as it's a little bit more technical. Once you've thrown an enemy upwards, with Slam equipped, you can bring them back downwards in any of the 4 directions. But without Slam, you have the option to further move the enemy either upwards or outwards. When you keep this in mind, you can actually move enemies away from other enemies and really control and manipulate the fights you're in. But the other great thing about really understanding Karnesis' directionality is that you can use it for stealth as well. You might not think of Karnesis as a stealth ability, but the ability to kind of just pick up an enemy and move them away is really stealthy when you use it right. There are also a bunch of ragdoll physics at play too, which means Karnesis is something you kinda equally have to react to. But if you can expect those ragdoll physics, you can really use them to your advantage. Next up, let's go over Pro Quickscope Karnesis Stasis Headshots. Or at least how to pull off Karnesis Stasis Headshots relatively easily. This kind of ties back into the ragdoll thing that we were just talking about, but the main thing you want to think about with Karnesis Headshots is making sure that the Eternalist's head doesn't, like, ragdoll forwards. So you can yank them left or right or in any direction that isn't going to make their head kind of tuck inwards, because that's ultimately going to make your headshot much more difficult than it needs to be. Now, for the reason maybe some of you even clicked on this video in the first place, Havoc. Havoc is easily the coolest ability, even if it isn't the most useful like Shift or the most malleable like Karnesis. Its cool factor totally makes up for all of that. And long-range invincibility is hard to say no to, but there are a couple of unique things you can use Havoc for outside of its invulnerability that to me are even more useful. You can use the Shockwave from Backlash as a quick AoE move to crowd control or for setting up easy executions. This is great to either give yourself some breathing room or even to kill small groups of enemies outright. Just pop up Havoc and quickly use the Backlash Blast wave and you've got a quick AoE Shockwave with really respectable damage output. But what's even more radical is making explosions with Havoc and gas clouds. Shoot any gas-emitting gun and use Havoc's backlash to ignite and explode the gas cloud, and you literally have explosions at your fingertips. It's a pretty powerful move because you get the shockwave damage and the explosion damage on an enemy at the same time, but try to keep a bit of space between you and the explosions to avoid any unnecessary self-damage. You can make a really awesome, easy addition to your build just for this too. All you need to do is add the Iron Lungs trinket to heal off of gas, get yourself the 2 gas guns and Havoc with Backlash, and you have an easy, pretty cool move at your fingertips and the ability to heal on the fly all in one. Here's a bit of an example on the Backlash Blast Wave and the kind of distance that you can have. But the more you use this trick, the more you'll get used to the spacing and keeping yourself away from the explosions as well. Aether is already broken as heck, but when you get to higher difficulty levels, Eternalists and players online will still be able to spot you, and from time to time you'll need to move with Aether rather quickly. So next up is some movement tech that I'm pretty stoked on. Dodging while in Aether. This is the fastest and furthest form of movement while using Aether consistently, allowing you to either quickly find cover or move from point to point, avoiding other players and NPCs along the way. All you need to do is dodge while walking in Aether and you get the burst of momentum from dodging, but none of the energy drain of sprinting, and it winds up being the fastest and most conservative form of Aether movement outside of using Shift. Even while using crouching, you still wind up only moving as far as you can while walking. But because of that extra little burst of momentum from dodging, you get an extra like 4 or 5 feet, which is rather useful from time to time. When using Aether dodging, you're going to have to really get used to the line "shimmers again" because you're going to hear it like a million times. But a lot of these quick kills here and assassinations wouldn't be possible without me using a little bit of dodging to close that distance.
Whoa! He's here! Someone shimmers again! Shimmers again!
As I was saying earlier, on higher level difficulties, the AI and more experienced players will be able to tell out Aether, and that's based on 3 things that make Aether kind of obvious. First up is the slab noise itself. Slabs make pretty distinct noises, and when you hear it, you generally know that a player is close by. Second is the shadow. You still leave a shadow even while in Aether. So if you're in a bright, well-lit area, that shadow will still be clearly visible. And lastly, the kind of most difficult method is spotting the visual distortion that Aether makes. Everything behind an Aether player is blurry and distorted, so look for this and you'll know exactly where an Aether player is. I couldn't really get any players online to chill for long enough to show off some good, clear examples, so I'm just going to use Igor here. And really, if you do want to practice, Igor is pretty solid practice, but nothing is better than actually going online and facing off against players.
Get out! Abandoned? As usual.
And for the final power, I really wanted to work Nexus in here somehow. Nexus is a pretty straightforward ability. There aren't, like, too many unique things about it. You can use it pretty creatively, but there's nothing about it like, you know, making explosions with Nexus or something like that. So instead, I wanted to take a look at the viability of the Parasite ability, or the Parasite upgrade on Nexus. And so there's a couple methods of mobile healing in this game. We already talked about one with breathing gas to heal yourself. And so this is another method of mobile healing, using the Parasite ability and connecting up, 2 or 3 enemies to get yourself a quick full heal on the fly while utilizing Nexus. It's really quick, it's really easy, the healing is respectable, and as well it's good for crowd control, so you get a kind of triple win out of this. Each enemy equals like 1 small bar of your health when you have the health upgrades, so keeping that in mind, you always want to be taking down at least like 2 or more so that you're getting a significant amount of healing. But if they're just individual enemies, picking off the one enemy can still be a nice method of healing off some sort of chip damage. So, 11 things that you maybe didn't know you could do with the powers here in Deathloop. Let me know, did you know any of these? Are any of these new to you? Are you gonna pick up any of them? Personally, for me, the Havoc explosions is like a must-have in my loadout nowadays. But, for now, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was helpful in some way, shape, or form. And I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, peace out.